was 12 when my teacher handed me the first letter from a pen pal in another city. We were only allowed to use our first names, so all I knew was that his name was Ethan and he loved books more than football. Every month we exchanged stories about school, embarrassing moments, and dreams for the future. We even created a tradition of ending every letter with the same sentence: "Every letter deserves a reply." After 3 years, the program ended without warning. My final letter came back stamped, "Address unavailable." I kept every envelope inside an old shoebox anyway. 10 years later, after countless failed dates, I reluctantly downloaded a dating app. One profile caught my attention because the bio simply read, "Looking for someone who enjoys quiet bookstores and handwritten notes." I smiled and swiped right without expecting much. Minutes later, we matched, and neither of us had any idea we'd already known each other for years. We spent weeks talking before agreeing to meet. Our conversations felt effortless, as if we'd skipped the awkward stage entirely. Ethan remembered tiny details I mentioned, like my obsession with rainy mornings and cinnamon coffee, while I could always tell when he was pretending everything was fine. Our first date lasted 6 hours because neither of us wanted it to end. We wandered through bookstores, argued over our favorite novels, and laughed until the CAF staff stacked chairs around us. Before saying goodbye, he admitted he hadn't enjoyed talking to anyone this much in years. I felt the same but kept it to myself. A week later, we visited a weekend book fair together. Near the entrance stood a table covered with postcards where visitors could leave anonymous messages for strangers. Ethan picked up a pen, smiled to himself, and carefully wrote a single sentence that made my heart stop the moment I read it. "Every letter deserves a reply." For a moment, the crowded book fair disappeared around me. I stared at the postcard, convinced it had to be a coincidence, but the words felt too familiar. That night, I rushed home and climbed into the attic, searching through dusty boxes until I found the old shoebox filled with faded envelopes. My hands trembled as I compared the handwriting from those childhood letters with the birthday card Ethan had given me a few days earlier. Every curve of every letter matched perfectly. I barely slept before asking him to meet me the next afternoon. When he arrived at the park, I placed the bundle of letters on the bench between us without saying a word. He looked down, picked up the very first envelope, and his eyes grew wide. A slow smile spread across his face before he whispered my name. Neither of us could believe that after all those years, we'd somehow found our way back to each other again. Ethan laughed so hard that people walking past turned to stare. Then he admitted he had recognized my love for handwritten notes long before the book fair, but never imagined I could be the same girl who had filled his childhood with letters. He hurried home and returned carrying a worn wooden box packed with every envelope I had ever sent him. "I couldn't throw them away," he said quietly. We spent hours reading our younger selves' dreams, smiling at the promises we'd forgotten we'd made. One letter said we hoped to meet someday, even if we were old and gray. We looked at each other and realized life had simply taken the scenic route. A year later, surrounded by our families, we framed our very first letters beside our wedding guest book. Before we walked into the reception, Ethan squeezed my hand and whispered our old goodbye one last time. "Every letter deserves a reply." And this time, forever was mine.